Bonnie and Clyde, love, crime, and tragedy. In the depths of the Great Depression, as America grappled with poverty and despair, two young dreamers from Texas would catapult themselves into infamy. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow were not just criminals, they were symbols of rebellion. Their love story, entangled with their lives of crime, created a myth so compelling that it continues to captivate the world. But behind their daring facade lay the grim reality of survival, desperation, and betrayal. This is the story of how two ordinary lives became an extraordinary legend, leaving behind a legacy defined by love, chaos, and tragedy. Bonnie Parker was a small-town girl with big dreams. Born in 1910 in Rowena, Texas, she lost her father at a young age, leaving her family struggling to make ends meet. Despite this, Bonnie was bright, creative, and ambitious. She loved writing poetry, dreamed of becoming a star, and longed for a life far removed from the poverty surrounding her. Clyde Barrow, born in 1909 in Ellis County, Texas, grew up in a similarly difficult environment. His family was desperately poor, living out of a wagon before settling in West Dallas. Clyde had a different kind of ambition. Charming and quick-witted, he hated the feeling of being trapped by poverty. From a young age, he sought an escape, first through music, then through crime. When Bonnie and Clyde met in 1930, sparks flew. She was 19, he was 20. Both were dreamers tired of small-town monotony and hard life. They formed a bond almost immediately, one fueled by shared desires for freedom, excitement, and a better future. Little did they know their love story would soon plunge them into a dark and dangerous world. Clyde Barrow had already begun dabbling in petty crimes by the time he met Bonnie. Stealing cars, robbing small businesses, and eluding authorities became his way of pushing back against a society he felt had failed him. Bonnie, initially hesitant, soon found herself drawn into Clyde's criminal escapades. The Great Depression was a time of desperation for millions of Americans, but for Bonnie and Clyde, it became the perfect stage to build their legacy. They started small, robbing local businesses and gas stations. However, as their notoriety grew, so did their ambition and the risks. Clyde's criminal activities escalated rapidly after being imprisoned briefly in 1930. His time behind bars hardened him, and when he reunited with Bonnie after his release, he was more determined than ever to pursue a life of crime. This would mark the end of their innocence and the beginning of what would become a deadly journey. Their budding life of crime soon grew into an organized effort. Clyde knew that to stay ahead of the law, they'd need a team. Alongside Bonnie, he brought in accomplices like W.D. Jones, just 16 years old at the time, and his older brother Buck Barrow, along with Buck's wife Blanche. Together, they became known as the Barrow Gang. Bound by loyalty and desperation, the gang terrorized small towns across the Midwest. They specialized in robbing banks, stealing cars, and raiding small shops. For them, it was survival. For the nation, it was spectacle. The gang became known for their daring methods and dramatic escapes. Clyde, now the de facto leader, was a skilled driver, often using stolen cars to outrun police. His love of fast V8 Fords became part of his image, symbolizing his speed and cunning. Bonnie, often romanticized as the gun-slinging femme fatale, was far more than a sidekick. She was a strategic thinker and a dedicated partner, even penning the now famous poem The Story of Bonnie and Clyde, which humanized their struggles. Their adventures made them national news. Photographs of the couple holding guns and posing with confidence stunned the public. Bonnie's petite frame and charismatic smile contrasted sharply with the violence of their crimes, while Clyde's unwavering loyalty to her added a tragic romantic flair to their image. Media outlets began painting them as rebellious folk heroes, a Robin Hood-like duo defying a broken system. But the public's fascination masked the harsh truth of their lives on the run. Between 1932 and 1934, Bonnie and Clyde would become the most wanted criminals in America. They robbed banks with brazen efficiency, often humiliating their victims, but rarely scoring large sums of money. Their true skill was evading capture, often fleeing across state lines to avoid jurisdictional conflicts between law enforcement agencies. Their crime spree wasn't just about clever schemes and getaways. It was also marked by violence. Clyde wasn't afraid to kill in order to protect the gang, and their robberies often became bloodbaths when cornered by police. The stakes grew higher with each passing month, forcing the gang into increasingly dangerous territory. Yet amid the chaos and violence, their bond remained unshaken. Bonnie, who was badly injured in a car accident in 1933, never wavered in her devotion to Clyde. Despite constant pain from her injuries, she remained by his side, a key figure in the gang's operations. As their crimes escalated, so did the efforts to capture them. Police raids became more frequent and intense. During one such raid in Joplin, Missouri, law enforcement recovered personal belongings, including a camera with rolls of undeveloped film. The resulting photos showing Bonnie and Clyde laughing and posing with firearms were published nationwide, solidifying their status as legends. Being on the run wasn't as glamorous as the newspapers made it seem. The Barrow gang lived in constant motion, sleeping in stolen cars or abandoned hideouts and relying on robberies for survival. Injuries, stress, and paranoia began taking their toll. The gang's alliances also started to fray. A police raid in Iowa in July 1933 resulted in the capture of Buck Barrow and Blanche. Buck died from his injuries, and Blanche was sent to prison, leaving Bonnie and Clyde to fend for themselves with increasingly few allies. Their fame was both a blessing and a curse. While their notoriety gave them an edge at first, it now made them targets everywhere they went. Local residents, tempted by large rewards, began tipping off the authorities. Friends and relatives who once harbored them grew wary of their association. Despite their waning support, Bonnie and Clyde's love seemed unshakable. Letters and poems Bonnie wrote during this time show moments of affection, regret, and defiance. They were tied together not just by love, but by the inevitability of their choices. As law enforcement closed in, betrayal sealed Bonnie and Clyde's fate. A Barrow gang associate, Henry Methvin, struck a deal with law enforcement to save himself. He revealed the couple's next moves, setting the stage for their ambush. The end came on May 23, 1934, in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. Authorities, tipped off by Methvin, set a trap along a rural road. Knowing the couple's habits, they waited patiently in the bushes for hours. When Bonnie and Clyde approached in their car, law enforcement opened fire without warning. In a storm of gunfire, the legendary couple was killed instantly. Over 150 bullets were fired, riddling their car and leaving no chance of survival. News of their deaths rocked the nation. The romanticized image of Bonnie and Clyde was shattered by the graphic photos of their lifeless bodies and bullet-ridden car. Yet even in death, their legend endured. Bonnie and Clyde were more than criminals. They were storytellers of their own lives, spinning a tale of love, rebellion, and defiance in their short time together. Their story played into the public's fascination with outlaws and their disdain for authority during the Great Depression. To this day, the duo is remembered as much for their love as for their crimes. Media would continue to mythologize them, from literature to Hollywood films. The 1967 movie Bonnie and Clyde, starring Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty, brought their story to a new generation, further cementing their place in American pop culture. But while their legend lives on, the true story of Bonnie and Clyde is a sobering tale. It's a reminder of how love can inspire both devotion and destruction. It's about how desperation and circumstance can push ordinary people to extraordinary choices. And it's about how, in the face of tragedy, we often find ways to immortalize those who dared to defy the rules, no matter the cost. Bonnie and Clyde weren't just outlaws. They were a reflection of their time, a symbol of rebellion, and a pair of dreamers whose story ended in heartbreak. Their tale is one that lingers, thrilling, haunting, and unforgettable,